Hey everybody, Economic Ninja here. I hope you're doing great. We're going to talk about China. We're going to talk about Brics. I think this is very, very important because people, I don't think, are grasping the entire story here, the entire narrative, what's happening. It sounds funny, but I'm going to literally just right now, right in front of you, I'm just going to type Google Brics. I'm going to go over a news story here, but I'm just going to hit news. All right. So right here in real time, okay? You guys, you know that I don't do any editing. All right, unless of course it's a paid video, because then they paid for it. I'm going to give them some editing. The country's bailed out by China. Okay, now this is out of Zero Hedge. I'm going to go over this and explain its implications, and we're going to talk about headlines. A new report published by the Ad Data Research Lab at Virginia's College of William and Mary shed some light on the unusual, non-transparent practice of Chinese bilateral emergency loans. Okay, now this is very, very serious. As Statista's Katharina Buchlotz reports, what the researchers that also hail from the World Bank, Harvard University, and the Kiel Institute of the World Economy identified 22 countries that were bailed out by Chinese loans when they ran into liquidity problems during 2020 and 2021. Okay, and we know that when COVID was happening, this was a big deal, and that countries were freaking out and they needed they needed help, right? Excuse me, let me get something to drink. Now, you know that Hillary Clinton and other famous people have said that I do not agree with, that I do not line up my ideals with them. Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? Now, honestly, I am turning that around on them and trying to teach people how to get into real estate and get into these asset classes, not now, but when they collapse, right? Don't let a good crisis go to waste. But they're doing it in a different way. And China has been doing this as well. See, China founded the BRICS nations, the BRICS alliance between Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Since then, they have been getting tons and tons of support. And I keep yelling from the rooftops how big of a deal this is. Why? Because they are putting together a system to take down the Western hegemony. Okay, now, whether you agree with it or not, and I do not believe that Europe and the US have been good people, with their good countries, good stewards, with the authority that they have had for the last 50 or 70 years, being able to essentially print money and export inflation through the Federal Reserve. All right, I do not agree with it. But with that being said, it is going to hurt millions and millions and millions, literally billions of people as this correction happens, this changeover. And people need to understand how serious this is, okay? But how one way that countries like China gain favor with other countries to join the BRICS alliance is through these emergency loans, okay? That's why it's very, very important to check this out. All right, so it says here, and again, this is things that are hidden, that aren't really seen, that people don't understand. Countries that utilize these loans, these emergency loans, in an especially high number of years, i.e., rolled over their loans into subsequent years, include Pakistan, Mongolia, Argentina, and Sri Lanka. Now, we have seen political, and usually it starts with economic upheaval in all of these countries, right? Pakistan really being not so much, but between Mongolia, Argentina, and Sri Lanka, we've seen all kinds of regime changes and things like that. Pakistan, really, you can think of it as the government, the US government's been involved there. But point being is here, the US government's been involved in Pakistan, and we see China giving them emergency loans, right? Getting them on the hook, the noose. All right. The latter country tapped China's central bank for the first time in 2021 before defaulting on its debt anyway in 2022. Argentina and Mongolia were also identified by the report as countries that have been in dire financial distress since early 2010 and were using China as a lender of last resort, despite the country's loan terms being less favorable than lower interest bailouts offered by the IMF and the US Fed. Now, think about that. If a country is already set up with bailouts from the IMF and the US Fed, why would they go with China considering that their terms are less favorable? Well, you'd have to start to think that they are seeing something that we don't, and that is that the IMF and Fed's terms are less desirable, and or they understand how big of a deal the BRICS are getting, and they are slowly transitioning into that. The list of Chinese bailouts also include countries experiencing major inflation events, like the aforementioned Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt. All right? The report finds that repeated rollovers by the Chinese loans provided by the central bank liquidity swaps place them in a dubious gray area that set them apart from similar lending practices. For example, liquidity swaps by the US Fed. These are also often used in crises, you know me in spelling, reading, situations must be paid back within 12 months or declared as actual debt. The Fed loans are most often used by developed nations, while developing and middle income countries, many of them also having accumulated regular debt to China, have been increasing, turning to the Asian superpower for emergency aid. These countries have therefore been able to hold on to swap lines for expended, I'm pretty sure it means extended, periods of time without having to declare more external debt, but at much higher costs at a loss of transparency in international debt. Now, this is really important. The way that these loans are structured in the beginning are as emergency, but they seem to roll over. And we're starting to see more and more countries being led by China. You see, in the Bible, it says that the lender is the master, right? The slave, the debtor is slave to the lender, right? And since China has so many resources that, quite frankly, Western powers have been mocking for decades, I believe in a way to try and get you off of the trail of what they're doing, they are able to go into these countries and provide emergency funding and then do rollovers, right? And it's almost like that the first one's free kind of thing, with sales techniques or even drug dealers. Hey, the first one's free, the next one's going to cost you. We're gonna get you once you're hooked to this money. You're going to keep coming back for more, right? Because you keep spending in a way that is reckless. Your government, your central bank, something like that, right? Now think about this. Bailouts, it says right here, bailout amounts provided by China remained quite low in the 2000s and early 2010s before shooting up from 2015 onwards, climbing to a total of 100 billion for the 2 decades. The two most common ways in which these loans work is through a liquidity swap with the Chinese central bank, where most of the outstanding balances of around 40 billion were located as of 2021. Now, this is very interesting because around 2015, when these loans started to shoot upward, is really when Brics started coming into effect, right? China has had a multi-decade plan on how to take over the West and their economy, but it really started in earnest around 2015 with the formation of Brics. And even before then, just so you know, and I don't remember the actual name Brics came out, I want to say in 2017. It was being planned years before that. All right. And it's very important to know how big of a deal this is, because as they take over Western powers, there will be a point where they can start to dump their US dollars and their bonds recklessly on the market, because it will make up just a fraction of what they own. Because what's happening is, as they buy more gold and they have more secured resources, like a story that I'm about to do on rare earths, we need to understand how much power they have. And when they say that just a little bit, they'll sacrifice just a little bit of their balance sheet to dump it on the open market to watch the US and the European bond markets implode. They will do that because it's a calculated risk. Now, check this out. Just a couple of headlines here. You saw me just type in Brics and hit news headlines 2 days ago. Brics common currency soon. India, China step to the counter. US step up to counter US dollars dominance. Here's 2 days ago from a different outlet. Russia leads Brics in working to create a new currency. Here's 3 days ago. Brics alliance working to create its own currency, says Russian official. This is so serious right now, it is insane. And pride always comes before a fall. So if you are not paying attention to the writing on the wall right now, you need to. And that is, an all-out economic war has been declared on the US dollar and on the euro. And if you're not ready for it, if you're not hedging against it, if you're not preparing now, stop getting in debt. Get out of debt. have cash on the side, but also hedge against inflation. That's why the wealthy people and central banks are buying gold like crazy. I hope you get something out of this because it is a very dire thing. It is not going to happen tomorrow, but in the next couple of years, the economic landscape in America will be drastically changed. All right, guys, that being said, the Economic Ninja is out.